introduction. Good evening, all dear participants, paper presenters, as well as the organizers and everyone who is part of the international virtual conference. And before we move into the technical session as such, um, I would like to share my happiness with you. I'm really happy for a person who I'm really proud of. My student, Dr. Regin Silvers, who is one of the chief organizers of this virtual conference. I'm so proud of him that he's organizing a conference of this status and having invited me to be a part of this virtual conference. My blessings and prayers for you, Dr. Regin. Yeah, you will go places. Now, coming to our presentation part, as we are running out of time, we are late by an hour. My instructions to the participants would be like we have got 5 participants over here, and they can take like 10 minutes each. The first part will be like introduce your paper and then the main content, and finally you can sum up with your findings. Let us have it like that, and immediately the paper presentation will be followed by certain questions. It will be open for discussion. We can have it like that instead of just having it at the end, so that you remember certain things read by the participants. So that's what I felt like. As soon as each and every paper gets over, it will be open for discussion. So you can just frame your questions while the paper presenter is presenting his or her paper. Now, we have 5 participants, as I told you, paper presenters. The first one is Dr. Ramesh P., Assistant Professor in History, St. Xavier's College, Tumba, Thiruvananthapuram. And the title of his paper is Varma Kalai, an exceptional martial art in South Travancore. So hope you might have listened to my instructions. Keep on to time. And a request to the audience, please post your questions. We are going to take up only 1 or 2 questions, and with that we'll wind up. Yes, now the floor is yours, Dr. Ramesh P.
Hello, ma'am. I'm Ramesh, Associate Chairperson, distinguished dignitaries, eminent personalities, subject experts, colleagues, and my dear friends. It's audible, ma'am?
Maybe you need a little bit of a clarity in audio. What about the audience? I do not know. Okay, you continue. Continue, please. Please continue.
Okay. Yeah. I am happy in this occasion to present the paper Varma Kalai and South Travancore. If you are not familiar about this topic, introduce this topic. What do you mean by Marmam is an art?
Dr. Ramesh, your voice is breaking. Please take a note of it. Your voice is breaking. It's an interesting paper, so everybody has to listen to it.
Okay.
Come on.
Now it's audible, ma'am?
Yeah. Now it's okay. Come, continue, please.
Okay. Is a marmam is an art and a double-edged sword. It can be used for treatment and defend oneself. That means it can be used for martial art. And in Ayurveda, it is described like marmam. And it has many other meanings. So,
Dr. Ramesh, you have got a problem with the audio. Dr. Ramesh, you have got a problem with the audio. We are not able to listen to you. You have got a...
But I can hear you very clearly. But,
okay, there is an echo. Okay, continue, please.
Okay, then the Varma text, which described instead of this word Varmam, it is used like Vasi, Uyir, Pranam, Kalai, Saram, Yogam, Pranan, Kalai, and those words they used instead of Marmam. Okay, and see, where do you see Marmam? Okay, in which area we can find this Varma? And the Varma can be seen in Cheka Kingdom. We can see that, and in and around of Kanyakumari district and Prasad, we can find Varma. Where it originated from? It is originated from the very origin of the human being itself. Its popularity, and especially the Jains and especially they popularized it. They handled it and now people use it. And this is I think that this is it's a varmology. That means the use of scientific use of marmum, or scientific use of marmum is called marmology. That is a Tamil text. That means all the verses and all the literatures are contained in Tamil language. Especially, it is a part and parcel of Siddha medicine, and all the names are described in Tamil names. Okay, and it is an art related. That means the Varma is an art. It is related art like Kalari, Silambam, acupressure, shiatsu, and those things. And see, you can find some of the photos are here. So these are the logs, okay, logs of Kalari. This is the log. This is the use of a small stick called Kurundadi. This is also a log. Okay, and these are the things. See how it happened. The Varma is how it is happened. Like, see, we can get to Varmam like getting of a blow, punch, faulty postures, then excessive physical activity, difficult in labor, knowingly or unknowingly, consented or not, directly or indirectly, naturally or unnaturally made attack, hit, knocks, we can get a Varmam. And see, those people also got a Varmam, like fishermen, carpenters, coolies, and the all those people also getting marmam knowingly, unknowingly, or directly or indirectly, naturally or unnaturally, they got a marmam. The marmam happens to men. Like, see, marmam, we can see that age and receiving blows, punches from the enemies and friends, doing exercise carelessly, getting food in practice and unfamiliar pathways, jumping lengthy leap forward and backward, knocking carelessly, running fast for a long distance, jump and climbing up horses and elephants. See, and a lot of things are there. And see, even the women also getting varmam. See, weightlifting, then pot containing water quickly and bending from the waist after lifting the pot. And see, embraced by a man who is stronger than her. And see, many things are there. Earning heavily with a loud noise. See, and even in the delivery time also they can get marmam. See, it is in 108. That means curable and incurable. And a lot of marmams are there, and the different texts are described in different manner. See, generally, the marmam is described like this. Marmam from the head to neck is 25. Between neck to umbilicus is 45. Between umbilicus to anus is 9. And the marmam points in the arms is 14. And the marmam points in the legs is 15. See, we can use, see, I told you that marmam can be used for either treatment and for defense purposes. See, if once get the marmam, and it can be used for herbs, roots, stems, and leaves, vegetables, even the animals and metals and minerals can be used for medicinal purposes. And based on the symbols, see, once got the marmam point attack, okay, and the fatal symbols are see, and the urine and the motion is expellation, then spinal cord broken and black blood exposed, and those are the fatal symbols. And if they see those kind of symbols, they do not treat them. Okay. And see those who are experts in the marmam is called marma asan. And a lot of things are there, and I just skip all those things. And see what is the use of this marmam. And see, women nowadays they are facing a lot of difficulties in the society as well as in the country. See, they can use it for defense purposes by giving a small pressure on their body, and they can escape from the dangerous situation. See, like women, and they can. It is very helpful for them, for the troublemakers and thieves and enemies and like that. And see, if one knows this marmam, the many wrong deeds and social evils can be prevented. And it is a medicineless medicine. We can use it for massage purposes and many things. Okay, so without medicine we can use it. And see, a lot of things are there, a lot of examples are there. Okay, and we have only a limited time, and so we just skip it. Okay, and see, and it is very easy to practice. Even the women also can use it, and because of the accident and other things, we get the ailments and chronic illness and paralyzing and all those things which were cured by very simple way. Okay, and bone related diseases, like a lot of things are there. Then sports related things are there. Okay, reduced weight also been there, and recovery after the surgery, and all those things are there. And those things are there. And my suggestion is this. And each one must learn something about the marmam to protect, either for protect himself or for basic knowledge, getting a basic knowledge about the treatment. Okay, and we will study at least one from a family. That is all, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. And yes, thank you.
Sir, I have one question to you. It's a good presentation.
Yeah, you may ask.
Yeah, it is a good presentation. It is on Varmakare. Sir, you have told that it is practiced in southern Travancore. So,
Excuse me. Sorry. Excuse me. I'm Dr. Ambika. I got lost for the past 10.
Okay, sorry, you have told that it is the martial art practiced in the southern Travancore. So, as it is an indigenous conference, so my question is very simple. I am President Ravana Literary Club. My question is very simple. Can you tell which are the caste people practice this Varmakare, and what is the difference between Varmakare and southern Kalaripayattu? Can you tell?
Yeah, actually, in Kanyakumari district, it was used by Brahmakula Kshatriya Nadas. There is a Nada caste, they used it. And see, there is no difference between the Kalari and Marmam. It is in Ayurveda, it is used, the word, instead of using Marmam, they used Marma. But there is no differences between Kalaripaita and Marmam. They used those marmams into Kalari, but in Kanyakumari district it is they used in a different manner, because they have Nadan Kalari as well as the marma is also being used. So that is something different, and treatment is also being different in Kanyakumari district. So, but actually the problem is. Many asans, they departed without knowing this Kalai into the other tradition. Okay. Without importing the Kalai. Yeah.
Sir, whether this young generation can practice Vermiculite, whether the asanas are there in Kanyakumari or in southern Travancore now presently?
Yeah. Lot of asanas are there. In Sidaral there is a Tangaraj asan there. Then in Mangare Jandros asan there. Then
Okay.
Munjarai Chindamani asan there, and a lot of asanas there. Yeah, still they are living there.
Okay. Okay, sir. Thank you so much for your good presentation and promoting Vermiculite. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you very much for giving the opportunity to present the wonderful people.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. Yeah.
So moving on, Ambika ma'am, are you there? Ambika ma'am, are you there? I think we have lost her connection. And Ambika ma'am, are you there? Have you joined us back? I think we will move ahead while she joins. We will go to move on to our next presentation by Rohini K. Putti.
Yes, I'm here. Can I begin?
Yes. In the meantime, I think ma'am will join, so you can start.
Okay, then thank you. Thank you, organizers. Good evening to all, respected organizers and all other learned academicians on this platform. I'm Rohini K. Poti, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Government College, Kasaragod, Kerala. My paper is titled Interpreting the Chronotopic Framework of Animal Folktales in the Past and the Present Dimension. So to begin with, let me quickly explain the term chronotop. It is Mikhail Bakhtin who developed the term in 1937 in his essay titled Forms of Time and the Chronotop in the Novel. The literal meaning of chronotop is time-space. So he writes that time and space are not separable, and adds that each narrative has, I quote, intrinsic connectedness of temporal and spatial relationships that make up a concrete whole. So my attempt through this paper is to stress the environmental dimension of animal folktales as a literary text by drawing attention to the concrete physical spaces in which stories take place. So chronotops serve, that is a time space, they serve as a pivot upon which the events of a narrative revolve. The narrative attains meaning and significance only when it is placed within the dimension of a chronotop. Animal folk tales are played out in the background of nature, with animals sharing equal or superior space with men. The chronotop in animal folktale cannot be separated from its backdrop, which is nature, because it is this backdrop that authenticates the chronotop. Men and animals occupied shared spaces as both were living in nature in the past. Contrary to this image of the past, men and animals now they live apart as their living spaces are demarcated. Animals are confined to spaces in the outer area or periphery, while men inhabit the center space. Forests, with its lush green trees and abundance of wild animals, are placed in the outskirts, and their life is considered as separate from the life of men. Man has come to believe his position as opposite to and superior to the animal world, as opposed to the primitive times when man called himself a brother to these beasts. It is a general tendency to imagine an animal folktale as unreal and fictitious. Animal folktales are considered simple oral tales with a limited function that speaks of a world in the past based on popular belief. Hence, the temporality and the spatiality is taken for granted, having not much of a significance in the events of the narrative. Unlike this highly held notion, it can be rightfully stated that the time-space is the determinant in such stories. The chronotopic study concerning folktales is associated with the study of the variants of a folktale, where the basic plot of the narrative happens in different countries, or the narrative, the plot is the same. Only thing is that it happens in different spaces, or the narratives have crossed over borders or gone to different places, and they are also taking place in different periods in time from the past up till the present. So according to the changing chronotop, the backdrop has also become different to suit the subsequent temporal spatial reality. So the animal folktales have detached themselves from the backdrop of nature, which was originally conceptualized in the primitive times. The same animal folktales are presented in newer surroundings to which the chronotop too is modified. I shall explain it with the help of an example. I've taken the story from Hitopadesha, which is something written in the 10th century, and I have taken the story titled The Story of the Crane and the Crab. and have used the story. I have taken the story from the Book of Good Counsel, which is the translation of Hitopadesha by Sir Edwin Arnold. So in the story, I hope many of you may be familiar with the story. There is a forest and there is a pond in the forest where lived a few fish and a crab, and a crane used to visit this pond and feast on this fish. So once the crane was getting very old and very it was very finding it difficult to catch fish, so it just worked out a plan. The crane told the fish that today I heard other animals speak in the forest that there is going to be a drought in the forest soon. So this pond, being a small one, is going to dry up fast. There is a bigger pond nearby. I shall help you all. I'll carry you all to the bigger pond and rescue you. So the fish were quite elated. It was just a trick that the crane played on this to catch the fish. And I hope you know what happened next. Means the crane took the fish from this pond, and on the way itself, there was no such thing as a bigger pond nearby. It killed the fish one by one. And one day it so happened that the crab which was living nearby was also wished to be saved. So the crab asked the crane, can you also save me, please? So the crane lifted the crab this time. And on the way, the crab saw beneath on the rocks were lying several fish bones, and it quickly understood that it was a trick played by the crane, and it killed the crane and got back to the pond and told the surviving fish that what the plot was made by the crane. And we all know, and when you narrate the story, usually it is narrated to children, and finally you conclude the story with the moral. We say that a friend in need is a friend indeed, referring to the relation between the crab and the fish. So this is the simple story. But when I look at the variants of the story, I found that the animals are not changed. The pond is the same. The intention of the crane is the same. The moral is the same. But there is a slight variation in the environmental background, which I would like to emphasize now. In the second variant, the crane told the fish that in the first version, the crane had told the fish that I heard other animals speak in the forest, there is going to be a drought. But in the second variant, the crane is said to have told that I heard two fishermen talk that they are coming to the pond to dry up the pond and catch all fish. And in the third variant, the crane is said to have told the fish that today I heard two people talk in the town that they are coming to level the pond, to landfill the pond, so you are all going to die anyway, so I'll rescue you. So these are the slight variations in the environmental dimension which are overlooked many times, because all we are concerned about a folk tale is its moral lesson which is taught at the end. So this is what I wish to point at now. So though these chronotop offer a field of possibilities for any modes of narration, in relation to animal folktales, their original worth is misplaced and undermined. An animal folktale is not any raw belief about the past that the present generation upholds, but they are a life space shared by both animals and men in a historical past. The living space in these animal folktales is nature, and hence the natural environment is not mere a place which is replaceable by any palpable surrounding as per the changing chronotops, but inseparable. So animal folktales are relevant only when they are positioned in the glory of the yesteryear's nature. Taking an animal folktale from the past and placing it in an abstract entity of future or concrete reality of present is destroying its true worth. This act of chronotopic detachment of these folktales is responsible for nature losing its import and its subservient status compared to men, and it being relegated to an inferior position. It has also caused animals also to lose their old world glory, and they are also looked upon as puny, ridiculous, minor, and insignificant. This substatus has affected animal folktales too. They are also looked upon as wise old tales fit for children alone and not requiring any serious scholarship or research. Hence, these animal folktales are considered fanciful beliefs lacking any logic or reason. This apathy to animal folktales is due to the prime reason that the spatio-temporal reality of these tales left nature out of its reality. In conclusion, it can be stated that these animal folktales are not unimportant artistic expression drafted to instruct and entertain alone. They are documents of a live culture that taught humanity to assimilate and accommodate as parts of nature and not a separate entity opposite to or superior to nature. So thank you everyone. Thank you for patient listening.
Thank you, Dr. Rohini, for your wonderful presentation, and that was an interesting paper, though I wasn't able to listen to it fully due to connectivity issues.
I
But
understand,
still,
ma'am. Thank you.
yeah, that's a problem. But
Yes.
you were talking about the coexistence of, right,
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
animals and human beings from
Yes.
a perspective, spatio-temporal perspective as such. I mean, bringing in a methodology, a theoretical perspective of reading it, that was really great. That was
Thank you,
wonderful
ma'am.
presentation by you. Chronotope, bringing in Bhakti's Chronotope,
Yes.
right? Okay,
Yes.
so that's fine. Now, without losing any further my connectivity, it's open for discussion. Participants, audience, please post 1 or 2 questions. We'll take up quickly.
Definitely, ma'am.
That's an
Thank you.
interest. Yeah, okay. That's an interest. It was an interesting paper actually. Just
Thank you,
presenting.
ma'am.
You can, yeah. That was so nice. You had a format as such, right? Brought in a theoretical concept and you explained it. Okay. And definitely, I think some of you will have some questions on it. Okay, which is very needed, as you told, right? A coexistence, and that's not a very leisure study or right, not just like that, but it has got a deeper thinking impact in our mind where we have to concentrate, focus, right? As we
Yes.
are looking at a lot of things happening in our surroundings now, right? Okay, a lot of elephants, they die. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, the amount of consciousness that we should have. Okay, fine. Any questions? At least one question. The paper is presented, at least one question. Quickly, so that we can move on to the next presenter. Anybody would like to ask a question? Unmute and quickly ask a question. Rohini is ready to answer. Or you can either type it in the chat box, your questions. Okay, fine, Rohini. That was a very good presentation. Good paper.
Thank you so much.
Right?
Thank you so
Okay,
much.
I'll send my mail ID to you. You can send your paper, full paper to me, like right? Because I couldn't listen to an entire paper, right? And sorry. But
it's my pleasure and honor, ma'am. Definitely, ma'am. I'll send it. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Rohini. Okay, the next presenter here is Professor Reshma, Assistant Professor of English, HSR Layout, Bangalore, and her paper is, the title of the paper is A Glimpse into the Indigenous Culture and Tradition of Kodagu. Okay, Reshma, you can start your presentation. Reshma, are you there? Can you hear me? Professor Reshma. It's a third paper, A Glimpse into the Indigenous Culture and Tradition of Kodagu. Once again, an interesting paper. We all are eager to listen to you. Where are you? Are you there? Organizers, can you help me out?
Yes, ma'am. I'm just checking it out.
Yeah.
No, ma'am. She is not there.
Okay, fine. Then we'll move on to the next paper presenter. Is Professor M.I. Babu, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Srinivasa Ramanujan Center, Shastra D2B University, Kumbakonam. And the title of this paper is A Study of the Sufferings of Tribal People in Stephen Gill's Adivasi. Yeah, that's it. Another interesting paper, I suppose.
Good evening,
Professor
Madam Chair.
Babu. Good evening. Good
Thank you so
evening.
much. Thank you. Good evening to one and all gathered. The title of the paper, Study of the Sufferings of the Tribals in Stephen Gill's Adivasi. See, tribals in general are marginalized and segregated all over the world. The present paper deals with the alienation of the tribals in Adivasi, a chapter in the novel The Chhattisgarh by Stephen Gill. He is a self-exiled Indo-Canadian writer, makes a thorough study of Adivasis, especially in the region of Bastar, an important hub of Adivasis in the newly carved state of Chhattisgarh. He tries to trace out the history of these indigenous populations, also the culture, tradition, superstitious beliefs, etc. Furthermore, he advocates for the protection of the livelihood as well as the culture and heritage. This paper tries to analyze the past and the present pathetic conditions of the Adivasis and also to find some possible solution to protect their rights who have been made refugees in their own land. This paper further highlights the exploitation of tribal people by affluent and politicians in their own land. It brings out a view how peaceful coexistence with the Adivasis will be beneficial to both the society and the Adivasis. The term Adivasi means a member of any of the aboriginal tribal people living in India before the arrival of the Aryans in the second millennium BC. The Adivasis have been living according to nature without disturbing its serenity for centuries. They were and are devoid of greed and exploitation like modern man. Let's see the challenges faced by the tribal people. First, the challenges faced by the tribal children in education in Bastar region. Language is a major challenge for the tribal children to learn. First, the child's mother tongue will be a tribal language, which has no script. Second, Halbi is the lingua franca in Bastar. Third, Hindi is the official medium of instruction. In addition, English is taught from standard first. Thus, the child's mind is confused and the state government misjudges them as students having low IQ. Adding fuel to fire, the teachers' prejudice against the tribal. Most of the teachers are non-tribal, and their homes are in the towns that takes much of their time and energy in travel. And the second point is the socio-economic conditions of the tribes. The tribal population is still illiterate and poor. Majority of the villagers are living in poor condition as most of them live in small and thatched houses. The sources of income were still limited and they were very much dependent upon forest and agriculture, having mostly small land holding, labor work and migration. The tribal community of Chhattisgarh has a meager literacy rate, and most of the educational tribal who understand and analyze the policies for the upliftment of tribal can presume that no political party in power wish to develop the socio-economic conditions of the tribes because they are scared that once the tribal get educated, they would know the strength and democratic rights as they are large in number than any other communities in the state. Tribes being indigenous are innocent, simple, and nature-loving away from modern luxuries. They don't know cheating, corruption, or exploitation. They will not sacrifice Mother Nature, land, or forest for the sake of economic development and industrial revolution. Raghu, the protagonist in the short story, being a pacifist, opines prosperity doesn't come with the destruction of trees, nor does it come from installing industrial complexes, nor by uprooting the helpless. Prosperity is nourished in the womb of peace. And it further observes, peace is the thoughtful blossom of live and let live, which silently spreads a healthy aroma of a meaningful prosperity. See, as per the Constitution, the Adivasi are meant to be protected and allowed to keep the land and practice their own customs, etc. But in reality, they are constantly charged and harassed by the forest guards for cutting wood for fire or plucking leaves, or exploited by corrupt government officials and police who are supposed to protect and safeguard them. The next point is exploitation of natural resources. See, as we know, Chhattisgarh is a state that was formed on 1st November 2000 from Madhya Pradesh. It is abundantly rich in minerals and produces 20% of the country's steel and cement. However, about 34% of the population is Adivasi, and rest is listed as backward class. Ironically, it is a rich state with a poor population. Most of the resources, especially the iron ore, are on the land inhabited by Adivasi for centuries. Government, to exploit the rich minerals, had displaced the Adivasi by force in the name of law. Many private corporations as well as state-owned companies have been set up, destroying the dense forests that cover nearly half of the state that are very valuable. As a result, deforestation has a disastrous impact on the Adivasi culture. The fourth important problem faced by the tribal people is Naxalites. Naxalite is a broad term often used by the Indian government to refer to the various militant communist groups active in different parts of India. Originally, the movement was started with an armed struggle to redistribute the lands for landless. The Naxalites shielded the Adivasis from exploitation, but in turn, they expected a member from each Adivasi family to join the movement. If they failed, they were forcibly recruited. But the irony is, most of the tribals do not share in Maoist ideas. They want to live in peace with nature. But the life of Adivasi has become miserable as they are caught between Naxalites and government forces. Innocent Adivasis branded as Naxalites are arrested and tortured and finally displaced from their land to roadside camps. Ultimately, the sons of the soil have become refugees in their own land because of the vested interests of politicians and corporate houses. To conclude, the need of the hour for the Chhattisgarh tribes is basic amenities such as food, water, sanitation, and education. Adivasis are peace-loving beings, devoid of greed, jealousy, corruption, and exploitation. Government must support, protect, and provide all services to help them to regain their individuality without disrupting the culture and livelihood. Destroying Adivasi is equal to destroying Mother Nature. Hence, government must implement development projects without disturbing the age-old culture, customs, tradition, and abode of Adivasi people. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Please switch on.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
I request the participants to switch off their audio. Please mute your audio. We are not able to listen to the presenters clearly. Thank you, Professor Babu, for your nice presentation for the study of the sufferings of the tribal people, though it was a descriptive research, right? Sort of describing the conditions of the tribal people in Stephen Gill's Adivasi, how we have to find out some possible solutions to protect the rights of the people, right, who have been made refugees in their own land, right? And also how they are exploited by the affluent society as well as the politicians in their own land, how they have been deprived of the land and they have been talking for a longer time. Okay, and Stephen Gill, of course, with his main postulate, like live and let live, right? That's what he talks about. And I can make a suggestion over here, like when you are taking up your work, right, for a research as such, if it has to be a research paper, this is my humble suggestion. Okay, try to find out, maybe you can put this under what you call as a cultural studies and bring out certain theoretical aspects to be dealt with, as we have a paper from Rohini, talking about, right, the chronotope and right, a little bit talking about maybe bringing in Althusser, the repressive apparatus, okay, how the political social conflict, so that's that would embellish your research paper as such. This is a humble suggestion. Okay, now it's over to the audience. Quickly, you can ask one or two questions because we are running out of time. We have got another session that is to be followed soon, technical session 6. So please ask your questions. You can register your questions over here so that Babu is ready to answer you? Anybody? You can unmute and ask. Right? At least 1 or 2 questions have to come from the audience, which is very important for a paper presentation.
Hello, this is Abhimanyu.
Thank you, Abhimanyu. Okay.
Yeah, I don't have a question, but I would like to compliment him because
You're
while
welcome.
listening to him, I actually recall one of the a novel written by an Indian author. I forgot the name of the author, but the name of the novel is Salt.
Okay, fine.
In which the tribal people are manipulated by the people of village or city, and eventually the tribal people suffer. So how tribal people, as you ma'am rightly said, that they are refugees in their own country. So I think Babu sir has really reflected the plight of all those tribal people, and we really need to put forward to the government, and there are provisions in the government, but practically they are not being implemented. So I believe that, sir, your paper was really very wonderful, and
Thank you.
it taught me, and I immediately could recall a couple of novels in which I have read about the tribal life and stories. Thank you so much.
That's fine, Abhimanyu, that you came forward to talk something on the paper. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Right, fine. Now we have got the last paper for this session, and I invite Professor Hema Hari.
Yes, ma'am.
Assistant Professor. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah. Yeah. Assistant Professor on contract. Why? Okay, you are an assistant professor. Okay, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Carmel College, Mala, Kerala. Am I right? It's Mala, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Mala. Okay, Mala. Okay, and the title of the paper is Folk Reflection in Girish Karnad's play Hayavadana. Okay, that's fine. You can start your presentation, Professor Hema.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
I am Hema Hari, working as an assistant professor on contract Carmen College, Mala. I would like to present my topic, Folk Reflection in Girish Karnad's play Hayavadana. Girish Karnad was not a playwright of India. He had performed enormous roles in the field of art. He was an actor, playwright, television artist, and film actor. In 1938, he was born at Madan near Bombay. He was belonged to Konkani family of Mangalore. He took his higher education from United Kingdom. Yakshagana, an oldest form, influenced Girish Karnad for his writing adventures. Yakshagana did not consider as a purified art form then, but it was also made a tremendous impact on the works of Girish Karnad. Folk reflection in the play. Hayavadana is a play. It was translated into English language. This play is a representation of folk themes. Karnad successfully pictures the conventions and motifs of folk theatre and folk tales. The unusual world has been created with the help of such devices as masks, curtains, and dolls. People are obviously regarded as the carriers of culture. The word folk represents the composite of social customs, modes, and form of behavior. The most of the people tend to preserve their civilization, customs, arts, craft, traditions, and superstitions from one generation to another generation. Hayavadana, Karnad's play begins with music and mask. A mask of Ganesha is brought on the stage. In India, people have deep faith in Lord Ganesha. Lord Ganesha is regarded as the destroyer of the obstacles. Hindu believe in God. Lord Ganesha is strongly mentioned in the play. Lord Ganesha's imperfection and incompleteness of body depicts the theme of Karnad's Hayavadana. Indian people are strongly developed their religious and superstitious beliefs within themselves. Hayavadana's visit of religious places of Benares, Rameshwar, Gokar, Haridwar, Gaya, grotto of our Virgin Mary are highlighted his sense of faith and superstition. The use of dolls in the play made strong observations in the personal life of Padmini, the leading character. The dolls can find that a man has come in the dream of Padmini, but it is not Devadatta, her husband. The dramatist seems to be very special about the structure of the plot. He started the plot with a prayer of Lord Ganesha and ended it again with an invocation to Lord Ganesha, who is the most widely worshipped deity in India. Friendship in the play. The story of the play, Hayavadana, revolves around two main characters of the city of Dharmapura, Devadatta and Kabila. The two young men are absolutely regarded as the heroes of the play. Devadatta is very handsome and unrivaled in intelligence. The other youth is Kabila. He is very dark and performs his physical skills in dance and strength. Kabila and Devadatta lived with one heart and one soul. Incredible nature of the play. The entry of Hayavadana is completely portrayed. The elements of incredible and confusion. Hayavadana is a depiction of the unbelievable fact of the play. His mother was a princess of Karnataka. She got herself married to a white stallion and gave birth to Hayavadana. Hayavadana, born of horse and a woman, thus came to have a horse head over human body. This eccentricity of the figure is not believable for the common people. This play is partly the story of Hayavadana. In a curious incident, Padmini places head of Devadatta on the body of Kabila and the head of Kabila on the body of Devadatta. This head mixed up scene puzzled the audience. Thus, the story is absolutely a narration of unreal dream than the reality. It arises keen interest and exaggeration among the readers. Theme of sexuality is also reflected in the play. Padmini, one of the leading characters of the play, develops a sexual desire with her husband's friend Kabila. Padmini had been making lovable overtones to Kabila, which annoyed her husband. This made an inner conflict in the mind of Devadatta. Search for identities. The play Hayavadana tells the story of a man with the head of a horse. A man with horse head is searching for his identity. He is cursing his fate and destiny. His problem is how to get rid of the horse head. He is begging to Kali Devi for his completeness. His search for identity is revealed in the subplot of the play Hayavadana. Devadatta and Kabila's lives obtain the theme of transformation in the play. Padmini's quest for a complete man, satisfied with this transformation. In the second birth, Kabila and Devadatta were searching for their identities and completeness. I am concluding my topic. Hayavadana is truly regarded as folklore. It provides historical information about a particular group of people and their culture. This play reflects the forms and rituals of celebration in Hindu religion. It may react the fight between good and evil and the right and wrong. Hayavadana really depicts the moral fights between Devadatta and Kabila. Folklore usually portrays about common people and their ordinary lifestyles. Hayavadana also emphasizes the story of the common people. The settings of the play are aptly used for the folk representation. The two plots are interweaved in Hayavadana. The main plot explores the mutual relationships of Padmini, Kabila, and Devadatta. The subplot discusses the story of Hayavadana. Hayavadana is obviously regarded as a folklore. The theme, action, settings are absolutely reflected Indian culture and customs. The religious and superstitious beliefs highlight the sense of tradition and Hindu customs of the people of India. Girish Karnad portrayed all characters and their roles in a simple way. The audience can undoubtedly consider this play as a folklore in its presentation and impact on the people. Thank you for giving me this great opportunity.
Thank you, Hema. That was a nice presentation. Your slides were beautiful, right? All those images and pictures that you showed. And indeed, Girish Karnad, the greatest dramatist ever, we can say, very influential dramatist. And we are so unfortunate that we have lost him. Right, and Hayavadana and his Nagamandala goes hand in hand as you are talking about the folk reflection, as well as viewing that from an anthropomorphic perspective, right? The human traits being inculcated, transferred into, right? Am I right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, viewing from that point of view. And as Rohini was talking about the animal tales and the need for, right, the coexistence between animals, and we get to listen, we get a moral, right, to all these myths and legends. When there is a revisitation of all these myths and legends by these great dramatists through this literature, okay, we come to know a lot about what you call as, okay, how they are intermingled, coexisting certain traits, and how we need a peaceful existence, coexistence between, right, the culture and the human significance of it, striking a balance as such. Now it's open to the flow, I mean the discussion has to end with one or two questions from the audience, of course. And most of you might have read the play of Girish Karnad. It finds a place in most of the syllabus of the university, Hayavadana Nagamandala. And I invite one or two questions to finish off the session. Any questions from the audience as far as Girish Karnad's play, Hayavadana, the folk reflection by Hima? She has presented a paper. Any questions from the audience? I do not know as time is, right? You all feel very tired. Okay. Nobody is raising a question as such, so you don't have any question to ask. Come on. Of course, we need one or two questions to be asked, and then only we can wind up. Yes. Anybody would like to ask a question? You can unmute. Ask a question directly to Hima so that we'll wind up this session. Yes, once again, Abhi.
Yeah, Abhi here. It's like all the presentations in this session, they are so beautiful and they are so engrossing that I don't think they leave us with to think immediately. They give us something to think of, something heavy stuff to think, which we will think overnight, and then we will realize what has happened and what we learned a new concept. So
that's fine, right? Because all these pieces already some of you might have read, isn't it? This Hayavadana, right? Adivasi, and okay, they were talking in general about certain papers like Varmakalai. Right, of course, we do have a lot of questions to be asked in that particular paper as such, right? Is Ramesh there? Dr. Ramesh, are you there? Right?
Ma'am, I'm here, ma'am.
Yeah. No, I didn't. I mean, I wasn't there. Like due to connectivity issues, I got lost in between. Like, you have another art connected with it, like Adimurai. Did you talk about it?
That is in Tamil Nadu, ma'am. In Tirunelveli and those places, it is known as Adimurai.
Adimurai. Okay. So, what is the? I mean, how are they related? This Varmakalai and Adimurai? Any idea?
See, actually, Adimurai is not giving punches or giving pressure on the Varma point, but it is giving a self-defense art only. But Varma is like all the art, all the punches, all the blows, all the strikes, based on the view points only.
Fine. That's a sort of a treatment, you say, right? A treatment for at the pressure points.
Yeah, that's only I'm telling. That's only I'm telling. It can be used either for treatment or in the defense.
Okay, fine. Thank you, Ramesh. And a question to Rohini. Rohini, are you there? Professor Rohini?
Yes,
Professor Rohini, you were talking about Chronotope, right, of Mikhail Bakhtin. Okay, as a narrative mode, when you talk about that as a narrative mode, right, and including time and space, can we relate to that? This is a query I'm just asking you to clarify certain things, right? Like,
yes, ma'am.
Can it be related to the stream of consciousness, like of when the modern writers talked about, like, for example, the novel of Virginia Woolf, Mrs. Dalloway, that happens in a single day. I mean, I'm talking about the literature part of it. Okay.
Yes. Actually, when Bakhtin used the term, he used it to explain novels, especially the literature and the language part of novel.
Yeah.
And he used it initially to state that how the time-space relation changes from genre to genre. That is, time-space in an epic is different from the time-space in a comedy. And again he stated that prior to his explanation given to Chronotop, time and space were treated as separately. And it was he who, using the various novels, explained that they cannot be separated. So I think it can be, you can use it to explain the stream of consciousness explained in Mrs. Dalloway as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Rohini. Any more questions on the papers presented in this session?
Ma'am, I forgot to tell Rohini something. Rohini, your paper was awesome and it has given me a new insight to look into the children literature, especially that includes a lot of animals
So nice
now.
of you, sir. Thank you. Thanks a lot, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much. And now you see that I may write another paper considering children literature and given your theories also.
No, you should
that's
definitely.
fantastic.
Thanks
That's
a lot, sir.
fantastic. Research goes like that. Okay, you take up from each and every where you go and listen to things, right? So thanks to Rohini for coming out with that paper, right?
Thanks a lot, sir. Because and especially folktales, especially animal folktales, are always underestimated as stuff fit for children alone. But that is not the case. That is not the case. When you go deep into it, you can consider it as fit for cultural studies, and you can apply any number of theories to it. Not just Bakhtin's theory. You can apply any theory.
Definitely.
Yes. Very true, because in Jammu, in my region, I used to hear lots of stories from my grandmother that involved lots of animals in that who worked as the messengers.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So I think you have given me a beautiful idea to explore the oral traditions.
Please do that, sir. Please do that. Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot.
That's nice. That was so nice. That discussion was so nice. And so we end up our session over here. We are winding it up. That was a great session, I would like to say. Even though I had some connectivity issues in the beginning, I was scared, like, right, I do not know, how I'm going to go about with this. But anyway, right, Bhimanyu, I have to thank you for coming to the rescue, right, going along with the discussion with the paper presenters and finishing it off. Good, thank you. So I thank the organizers and all the presenters. Have a happy day. Stay safe, stay healthy, be happy. Thank you, organizers, once again for giving me this opportunity to chair this session. Thank you all. Thank you.